The Forgotten Road. On a summer road trip, Mark took a shortcut through a rarely used highway surrounded by dense woods. As night fell, his car radio crackled to life with a static voice. "Turn back before it's too late." I never thought a simple shortcut would turn into the strangest night of my life. It all began on a warm summer afternoon, the kind of day when the sun feels like a soft blanket and the air carries that faint scent of pine and dry earth. I was on a road trip, something I had done dozens of times before, but this time I decided to take a different route, a shortcut my friend had mentioned in passing. A rarely used highway, surrounded by dense woods far from the buzzing highways and neon signs. The kind of road that seemed forgotten by time itself. My name is Mark. I work in a small town about 3 hours from the city where life is slow and familiar. For years, I've lived in a modest apartment on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just enough space to call my own. Most days are predictable: coffee in the morning, a quiet commute, the usual work emails, and simple dinners alone. I'm not the kind of guy who seeks out adventure. Routine is comforting, safe, but that day I wanted something different. Just a little detour from the monotony. So I drove. The highway was narrow, flanked by tall ancient trees that seemed to lean inward, as if whispering secrets to one another. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. No other cars, no chatter from other drivers, just the hum of my engine and the occasional rustle of leaves stirred by the breeze. Everything felt normal, the kind of normal you don't question until it's already gone. The radio was playing old classic rock songs. I could hum along with a soundtrack for the empty road. Then suddenly, the signal cut out. Static buzzed through the speakers, crackling like an old radio trying to find a station. I fiddled with the dial, but all I got was a whispering, garbled voice repeating a single phrase: "Turn back before it's too late." I laughed nervously. Probably some prank or a glitch in the system. I told myself that the highway was just old and neglected the radio, picking up interference from some forgotten transmitter deep in the woods. But the words lingered in my mind like an echo I couldn't shake. The road stretched on, fading into dusk. Shadows from the trees grew long, and the sky darkened to a deep navy. I glanced at my phone. No signal, no GPS. I was truly alone. The feeling settled in then, a curious mix of calm and unease, like walking through a familiar dream, but knowing something was slightly off. About an hour into the drive, I saw a small rundown gas station. It looked abandoned, peeling paint-bordered windows, no lights on. Yet the pump hose was still there, dangling in the dim light. I stopped, curiosity pulling me out of the car. Maybe I could get a phone signal nearby, or find someone to ask for directions. The air smelled faintly of damp wood and something else, something metallic and cold. Inside the station, the shelves were empty except for a dusty ledger on the counter. The pages were yellowed, handwritten notes dating back decades. I flipped through, but then a name caught my eye, scrawled in faded ink near the end. Mark. My name. I blinked and looked again. It was a list of travelers, names and dates. Many hadn't returned. I chuckled uneasily. Coincidence, right? Someone with my name, or maybe an old visitor. I shoved the book into my jacket and hurried back to my car. Driving again, the road narrowed further. The trees grew closer, branches brushing the roof of my car. The radio crackled once more, the whisper now clearer but still distorted. Turn back before it's too late. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, heart beating faster. I told myself to stay calm. This was just an old road, maybe haunted by local legends or ghost stories people told around campfires. I wasn't superstitious. Still, the feeling lingered. The woods seemed alive, not with animals or birds, but something else. Watching, waiting. As night fell completely, the road became almost invisible under the moonlight, and I realized I had no idea how much further I had to go. And then I saw it. A flicker of light between the trees, faint and distant. I slowed down, curiosity pushing me forward despite the unease. As I got closer, the light revealed itself to be a lantern hanging from a crooked post by the side of the road. Below it, a hand-painted sign read, "Welcome to Blackwood." I had never heard of Blackwood before. The road to this forgotten town seemed both inviting and forbidding, a place frozen in time, where secrets waited just beneath the surface. I parked my car near the edge of town, the lantern's glow barely reaching the cracked pavement. Silence swallowed everything except the faint hum of cicadas. I stepped out, my breath visible in the cool night air. I felt like I had stepped into another world. A quiet, deserted town, untouched by the modern pace of life. It was beautiful and eerie at the same time. I wondered what stories this place held, and whether I was truly alone. The town of Blackwood was smaller than I could have imagined. A handful of weathered buildings, huddled close together, their windows dark and empty. The silence was thick, pressing in on me like a weight. I walked slowly down the cracked sidewalks, my footsteps echoing louder than they should in the stillness. There was no sign of life, no lights, no movement, no sounds other than the whispering wind threading through the trees. I told myself this was just a sleepy town, maybe abandoned for years, left to decay quietly. But as I wandered, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I reached what looked like the town square, a small patch of cracked pavement, bordered by an old fountain long dry and covered in moss. Near it stood a bulletin board, tacked with faded notices and peeling posters. One caught my eye, an old missing person flyer dated decades ago. The photograph was so faded it was barely visible, but something about the eyes stared straight into me, hollow and pleading. I looked around nervously, a cold shiver running down my spine. Suddenly, the faint sound of footsteps behind me made me spin around, but there was nothing there. Just the shadows of the trees stretching across the street. My heart pounded louder than ever. I told myself it was probably an animal or my imagination playing tricks. Then I noticed the flickering glow of a candle behind a cracked window in a small house nearby. It was the only sign of life so far. Curiosity pushed me forward. I knocked on the door. No answer. Then a cold draft blew through, carrying with it the scent of old wood and something I couldn't place, something slightly metallic and bitter. I glanced through the window. Inside the room was empty, except for an old rocking chair, swaying gently back and forth as if someone had just left. My fingers tingled. I stepped back. From the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of something moving, a shadow, slipping quickly behind the curtain. I called out softly, but no one responded. That night, I found a small motel at the edge of Blackwood. It looked run down, but functional enough for me to rest. The room smelled faintly of damp carpet and stale smoke. I unpacked my bag slowly, the strange energy of the town settling into my bones. As I sat on the bed, my phone buzzed a message from an unknown number. Don't trust the quiet. It hides everything. I stared at the screen, my skin prickling. The radio in the room turned on by itself, crackling with static before the same voice whispered again, "Turn back before it's too late." I tried to shake off the fear. This was just some trick, a glitch or prank. Maybe someone testing my nerves. But then things got stranger. Around 3 a.m., I was jolted awake by a soft knock on the door. Slow, measured, like someone tapping for help. I looked through the peephole. Nothing. No one. Yet the knocking continued, steady and deliberate. I sat frozen, heartbeat racing, every hair on my body standing on end. The knocking stopped abruptly, replaced by the faint sound of whispering, unintelligible but urgent. I wanted to run to leave the room and this strange town behind, but something kept me rooted, a morbid curiosity I couldn't explain. Later, I found an old diary tucked under the mattress, its pages yellowed and brittle. The handwriting was hurried, almost frantic. As I flipped through, I realized the entries were from a previous tenant who had stayed in this very motel. The last entry chilled me. The road calls to me. The voice is getting louder. It says my name. I fear I won't leave this place. Then, scrawled hastily at the bottom of the page, was a name, mine. I closed the diary quickly, a cold sweat breaking across my skin. Was someone playing with me? Or was this place alive in ways I didn't understand? I tried to make sense of it all, the whispers on the radio, the knocking, the diary. Sleep escaped me that night. In the silence of the motel room, I felt the shadows creeping closer. The line between reality and something else was thinning. Something wasn't quite right in Blackwood, and deep down I knew my journey had only just begun. The nights in Blackwood grew heavier, as if the darkness itself was thickening around me. Sleep became a fragile thing, broken by whispers and shadows that seemed to creep just beyond the edge of vision. I started noticing patterns, small but impossible to ignore. Every night at exactly 2, the radio would burst to life in my motel room, crackling with static before the voice whispered, "Don't look behind you." At first I thought it was some glitch, but after a few nights it felt deliberate, like a warning. I tried to ignore it, but that voice burrowed deep into my mind. One evening I ventured back into the woods surrounding Blackwood, hoping to find answers, or at least a way out. The trees seemed to close in tighter, their branches scraping against each other like bony fingers. The air grew colder despite the summer warmth. As I walked, I came across a weathered sign half buried in leaves. It read, "Beware the Forgotten." I shivered and kept going. Near a small clearing, I found an old well, its stones cracked and moss-covered. The silence there was absolute, too absolute. Peering into the dark hole, I heard faint whispers echoing up from the depths. Names, perhaps, or desperate pleas. The next day, determined to make sense of everything, I visited the town library, or what was left of it. It was little more than a crumbling building with shelves coated in dust and forgotten books. Among the archives, I found a brittle newspaper clipping dated nearly 50 years ago. It told the story of a child who had been kept captive in Blackwood, a boy gagged and hidden away in a house near the edge of town. No one ever found him. I felt a chill run through me. The house was just a few blocks from the motel. That night, I couldn't resist. I walked toward the abandoned house under the pale moonlight. The windows were dark, broken in places like hollow eyes staring into the void. I pressed my ear to the door and heard muffled sobbing, soft and heartbreaking. Inside, the air was thick with decay and forgotten memories. The floorboards creaked under my feet as I explored. Suddenly, the temperature dropped sharply. My breath came out in visible puffs. A cold whisper brushed past my ear. "You shouldn't be here." I spun around but saw nothing. I noticed strange symbols scratched into the walls, marks I couldn't decipher, but they felt like warnings. Back at the motel, the nightly radio messages became more direct. "Lie and it will find you. The shadow follows the truth." I realized the presence wasn't random. It responded to me, to my fears and secrets. Sleep became impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw shadowy figures lurking just out of reach, watching, waiting. One night I chose to lie in the bed farthest from the door, but something changed. The next morning, the top bunk above me was scratched deep with marks like fingernails, clawing desperately. But I was alone. I began to wonder if this place fed on fear or guilt, twisting reality to trap its victims. The house's dark history wasn't just old tales, it was alive in the present, wrapped in rules I didn't understand but had to obey. Every lie I told to myself seemed to summon the shadow closer. I was trapped in Blackwood's grip, caught between what was real and what was nightmare. And the more I tried to escape my own mind, the tighter the grip became. By the fourth night, exhaustion had hollowed me out. My mind raced, but my body was heavy with dread. I couldn't tell if the shadows creeping closer were real or born from my own unraveling sanity. I knew the rules now. The warnings whispered on the radio, the hidden history of Blackwood, the voices demanding truth. But fear is a tricky thing. It pushes you to obey and sometimes to rebel. I told myself I would break free. I packed my things quietly and slipped out of the motel, stepping into the cold midnight air. The town was silent, the trees casting long menacing shadows. The radio in my jacket crackled to life louder than before, drowning the night. Turn back before it's too late. I ignored it and headed toward my car, parked near the edge of town where the forgotten road awaited. As I approached, the air thickened, pressing down on me like water underwater. Suddenly I heard footsteps behind me, slow, deliberate. I spun around. Nothing. But then from the corner of my eye, a figure emerged, a pale silhouette, standing just beyond the tree line. Its face was obscured, but I could feel its eyes boring into me, cold and empty. I froze. The figure raised a hand pointing toward the road. "Don't lie," it whispered, voice barely audible, but sharp like a knife. My throat tightened. I realized I had been hiding something, a truth I hadn't faced. In a sudden flash, memories surged back, a lie I told my family before this trip, a secret I buried deep. I looked down and saw my hands scratched and bleeding, the marks fresh but inexplicable. I tried to run to my car, but the ground seemed to shift beneath me, roots twisting and grasping like fingers. The radio's voice grew urgent. "Don't sleep when I'm awake." I stumbled back toward the motel, heart pounding. Inside, the room was different. The walls were covered in strange symbols, carved with nails and scratched deep into the plaster. The doll from earlier sat on the bed, not still but slowly crawling toward me, its cracked porcelain face twisting into a sinister grin. I turned my head, heart pounding. On the ceiling, fresh words appeared carved with my own fingernails. "Don't sleep when I'm awake." Panic swallowed me whole. I realized this place was a trap, and I had already crossed the line. The voice whispered one last time, close to my ear. The forgotten road never forgets. And then everything went black. Days later, the highway patrol found my car abandoned on the side of the forgotten road. No sign of me. Only the radio still crackling with static and faint whispers, warning any traveler who dared to listen. The forgotten road waits, and sometimes it calls your name.